Will Robertson claimed off waivers. Ryan Kreidler DFA'd. If you're shrugging, you're not alone. Let's get into a new episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Pirates, your daily dive into all things Pittsburgh baseball. I'm Gary Morgan. Today, we're breaking down a quiet roster move, explaining a stat that's often misunderstood, and taking a look at two teams steamrolling their way toward a potential World Series clash. Let's get into it. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So Will Robertson was claimed from the White Sox. And before you get too excited about Ben Cherington shopping in a different place, before he was a White Sox, he was what? That's right, a Blue Jay. It seems as though if you were ever a Blue Jay, there's a good chance that Ben Cherington wants to take a shot at you. Listen, Ryan Kreidler was designated for assignment to make room for him. And for the most part, all I can really say is this is a shoulder shrug move. Guys, I mean, this just doesn't matter. These sorts of moves don't matter. I know we as fans, we often see things like this. And the first thing we want to say is like, oh, well, this is their plan for how they're going to fix blah, blah, blah. I highly doubt that that's what's being done here. I highly doubt that that's the plan. Let's talk a little bit about the player, though, because you never know. Robertson is 27 years old. He made his MLB debut this year, and he hit just 129 across 27 games with Toronto and Chicago. He struck out 27 times and walked twice. Defensively, he's played all three outfield spots, mostly left and right. In the minors, though, Robinson showed some pop. 2025 minor league stats, he hit 289 with a 387 on-base percentage and a 571 slug with 21 doubles, 20 homers, 60 RBI, and 89 games. He was drafted in 2019 by Toronto out of Creighton. He hit double-digit homers 6 times in the minors. It's a classic Pirates move, low risk, depth building, likely temporary. Robertson could be a AAA outfield option or a bench bat if he sticks, but don't bet on him surviving the 40-man crunch even in December. Kreidler, meanwhile, never played a game for the Pirates after being claimed from Detroit in August. Bottom line, this is just, again, a shrug, a depth dart, nothing more. Fans tend to want to make this stuff more than it is, and reality is, I get it. You want them to do things, and you want to assume that every move has some kind of a major purpose. But the truth is, if you just look at the Pirates AAA situation, I would say, like, if you're just looking for depth that could potentially help up here in a pinch, you think about what they're going to consider returning or not returning. Jack Sawinski, Ji-Hwan Bae, those are both guys that you probably want to start at least considering letting loose altogether. And if you do, well, you're going to have some warm bodies to play these spots, right? And if nothing else, it gives you some options. I don't hate these moves. I don't get excited about these moves. I don't tend to overanalyze them all that much. In fact, just going into his stats the way I did here on the show today is, well, it's not normal for me. Frankly, I usually do a quick pass over look at stuff like this, and I kind of figure if he gets a shot, I'll start judging him then. What's the point in dealing with it now? I mean, this is a guy that hasn't gotten an opportunity on two teams, right? One that, is currently in the ALCS, so you could make an excuse that they just didn't have room to deal with another younger guy and I use the term younger loosely with him being 27 years old, but younger in experience, let's just say. Or, is it a guy that they really see a future in? I doubt it. I really doubt it. We've just seen this play out too many times. And the funny thing is, I think if you're a fan, you go into an off season like this, the last thing you really want to see is taking swings at players along this ilk at this point, because you need real help at the major league level. This is a left-handed Alexander Canario. You might think that Alexander Canario's got a lot to give. I mean, but Alexander Canario doesn't have any options. This guy does. So, I mean, there's a little difference there, but it's a guy that might survive the 40-man, might get a chance in spring, most likely is nothing more than depth they plan to carry at the AAA level all year. And I think, Josh Palacios type, that's really what we're looking at here. And I just hesitate to make too much of a big deal out of it. It's not as though anybody important was cut loose to make. If you really want to go back, I could say the same thing. This is the exact same way I handled the Ryan Kreidler pickup when they first did it. I never saw him playing. He didn't. I mean, they brought him in. He sat on the bench. They sent him down without ever letting him touch the field, replaced him with Ji-Won Bae, as a matter of fact. And, I wasn't surprised by it. I shoulder shrugged. And I feel like I do that with like so many moves that Ben Cherington makes. A lot of these types of around the edges type roster move, they're not designed for you to get excited about. You're not supposed to start fantasizing about what the team could be based on waiver wire pickups and whatnot. They're just depth. But at this point, I think, 5 or 6 years in, I think you could give a little bit of leeway. Like, yeah, you haven't built, a strong major league core yet based on what you have drafted and developed and brought in here via trade and everything. And I think some reasonable explanations can be given as to why you haven't reached that territory yet. It takes time to develop guys. Of course, you've had some misses along the way. Some guys, are in certain stages of development, or some guys were so young when you got them. It's just going to take a while. You can make excuses for all that stuff. What I've struggled to make an excuse for is that here, as we head into 2026, I mean, we've just wrapped up 2025. We're heading into 2026. We haven't even developed to the point where we fed AAA with potential guys who could come up and contribute. Like, it doesn't mean that I have to think, let's take a guy like Matt Frazier. Okay. It doesn't mean that I have to think a guy like Matt Frazier is poised for a gigantic major league jump and he's going to take the next step and everything. But I would like to think that at this point, I've got 5, 6 Matt Fraziers that I've built myself, that I feel I can stash in the minors, and I feel like are borderline getting a shot here in the majors, a chance for them to push their way onto the roster. That's not what they've done. And I think it's because of their failure in that department that we have gotten to the point where we're just bringing in retreads every year and we go through this every single season. Sometimes they'll bring in guys with names like Nick Solak, Miguel Andujar, blah, blah. They don't seem to know what to do with those guys either when they bring them in, right? Like, I'm confused by this methodology, if only because I don't think they actually utilize what they're trying to build. It makes sense to build up some depth, a little bit of a safety net in AAA of capable guys that could come up here and contribute in a pinch. It doesn't make sense to bring in those guys and then sign somebody underwhelming like Tommy Pham to pseudo block them when you might get just about the same production out of guys much like this. Like they really need to just step up their area where they're looking in general. This stuff, these moves, these are going to happen. Every team does them. Every team. The Dodgers will do them after the season's over. I mean, and I'm not even joking. They'll do it with relief pitchers. It's a real good way to steal cheap talent that somebody else either doesn't want to pay for, doesn't want to take the time for it. There's nothing wrong with the methodology. My problem is, more often than not, it feels like the only methodology they're employing in order to bring any kind of level of talent close to the league into this organization. I think there's better ways to approach that. I think we saw them do something very similar with Spencer Horwitz. Older guy, had just broken into the league, had maybe a half a season of experience. That's a little bit better than this category. This category is barely broke into the league. 2 teams have decided he wasn't good enough. I go back to what I talked about with the Blue Jays. Yeah, they're in the ALCS. They're a World Series team. You could make the excuse that they just didn't have the time to deal with this. Well, what is your excuse for the White Sox? Why couldn't he make it on the White Sox, right? And if he couldn't make it on the White Sox, it's just so difficult for me to see a path for him to have success here. If he couldn't crack the lineup in Chicago, the South Side, why should he crack it here? Why should we be even shopping in a territory where that's a possibility? If you just want depth, competition, whatever. But I really meant what I said. I don't necessarily believe Robertson will even clear December. I think this is a case of bringing in guys like this, DFAing them, hoping they clear waivers because of the time of the year when you do it. Then maybe you get to stick them on your roster for free. I think that's probably the idea being sought after here. But I could argue I don't think it's the greatest concept ever. I really don't. We're going to have to take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about OPS Plus. I promised you guys that I would follow up OPS with OPS Plus just to kind of give you a well-rounded idea of how these two stats kind of play together, why they're different, why one's important. There's nothing like catching a baseball game live, the energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person. But actually getting tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees. It takes all the fun out of it. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives you the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by a Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. The app makes it super simple. You can even see the exact view from the seat before you buy it. And I already mentioned it, but it's super important. Know your total up front. The fees are included with no surprise fees at checkout. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Hey everybody, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. Make sure you smash that subscribe and like button for me. Drop a comment. Before we get into OPS Plus, listen guys, I got to do a little bit of a humble brag here for real. You guys have taken a season where your baseball team underwhelmed dramatically, and you have somehow helped me grow this channel like gigantically. We have moved this thing a ways. I mean, across the entire Locked On network, we have grown faster than almost anybody. And it's all because of you. It's certainly not because the Pirates have been a pleasant story to tell this whole year, but you guys keep showing up and you guys keep interacting. And you know the other stat that I love the most? You guys listen to way more of this show than other people do in other markets. And I love it. It means that you value all three segments, and that means that I'm at least hitting on things that you're interested in. I could not appreciate you more. Thank you so much. OPS Plus. Yeah, so we just did OPS yesterday. And I kind of want to just make sure we understand the difference, because I think sometimes these things get thrown out there and they just confuse people, right? The stat that gets tossed around here, OPS Plus, it stands for on base plus slugging plus. It's a normalized version of OPS that adjusts for league context, ballpark effects, and here's how it works. So you start with OPS, which is on base percentage plus slugging. We just talked about that yesterday. You adjust for how hitter friendly or pitcher friendly the player's home park is. You normalize the whole thing to a scale where 100 equals league average. So an OPS plus of 120 is about 20% better than the league average currently. OPS plus of 80 is about 20% worse than league average. It allows for fair comparisons across eras and ballparks. Because we talked about how batting average is so down this year in the majors, right? And it's really hard to go, hey, this guy this year is a good hitter. Look around the league. 270 means a heck of a lot more than 270 meant 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, somebody could have had those exact same numbers and been probably in the bottom half of players in the league. You get what I mean? So OPS Plus normalizes that. It allows you to compare across eras a lot better. I can go back and look at the OPS Plus numbers for a player in 2020. You know what I mean? And I can compare that, and it was a short season that didn't matter and all this stuff, but I'm not looking at all the numbers you accumulate. This is a percentage based thing. This is where you are in relation to your competition. This is where you are with a lot of the excuses taken away. This is where you are when the league is doing a certain thing. So if the league changes the balls, they deaden the balls and home runs start to dry up. Well, everybody's OPS plus number might be more reflective of the type of player they are versus the traditional numbers like average and OPS and whatnot, because the whole league is down. Conversely, if the whole league's up, OPS plus will still be a more true number. That doesn't mean that you don't ever want to just look at regular OPS. I do. And that's enough for me to get a good gauge on a player, right? But when I start looking at OPS plus, or a lot of the plus numbers you'll find are percentage comparisons with the league. It's just a way to kind of balance everything and give you a more fair picture of what you're trying to look at. And as the league adjusts and changes throughout the years, or different things happen, or Colorado goes off and hits 200 home runs in this, in the first 5 months of a season or something, you can adjust for it with this figure because of the ballpark conditions. So OPS plus is just another way of looking at the same kind of numbers. They still are formulated from the same sets of things. They're just presented in a different way that to some is a little more fair. I can go back in time and pull up the OPS plus numbers for guys like Roberto Clemente and Babe Ruth and Roger Maris, and I can compare them to guys from today, and I can feel pretty good about it. Whereas most comparisons like that, you lose a lot with translation. You lose a lot. Oh, they weren't hitting the same kind of fastballs. They weren't hitting the same kind of balls. The pitchers weren't higher up. They didn't raise the mounds yet. There's so many different factors involved in baseball. That's true. So as you compare the OPS plus numbers, what you basically get is, okay, all that's true. We know about all those different iterations and different factors involved and why the game was different. But in relation to his peers, here's where Babe Ruth was. Here's where Roger Maris was. And now in relation to his peers, here's where Aaron Judge is. Here's where Shohei Ohtani is. I think it's probably the coolest tool there is for that. I don't like figures like WAR for that. Again, I think it's very difficult to judge WAR. I think WAR's just got almost too many factors built in and too much subjectiveness to kind of really look at like that. So I personally like OPS plus for hitting, at least as a good determination factor. If you guys still like these advanced stats lessons or whatever we're calling them, please let me know. I'll do more of them. I don't want to make it like a daily segment because honestly, I'm going to run through these pretty quick. I don't think a lot of them are all that interesting. I think a lot of them you'd be better off just not bothering with. But I do think there's some things, and maybe I'll bring on like a pitching expert to help me talk through it a little bit when we get to this point. But I want to talk through some of those advanced stats for pitching in particular, because I think it'll really show you what scouts are thinking now when they're looking at players. They're looking at different things and they're looking at different sets of stats now to kind of determine what's important, what looks good, what looks projectable. And those plus numbers, I think, will really help us. But I think I need maybe the backing of somebody that actually is in that world to kind of help paint the picture. So it might be a rarity on this show. I might bring a guest on to kind of help with that as we move forward. But let me know in the comments if this is something that continues to interest you and you want me to keep rolling into, because it's fun for me to cover them, but I don't need the lesson. So if you don't need it either, let me know. Let's roll on to segment 3. We're going to talk a little bit October baseball because it has been fun so far. And I think some storylines are taking shape. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel, it makes sports interesting. I just love watching the NFL and putting all kinds of silly prop bets all over the place. In fact, I just won money the other day when Trevor Lawrence got tripped up in the backfield and somehow stumbled for a touchdown. And it was like the most ridiculous way to win ever. I took a lot of pleasure in it anyway. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Hey, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. It's playoff time. Let's talk about it a little bit. I'm trying to do this maybe once a week. You know, I'm interested in it. I know you guys are too. I don't want to take it too far, and I certainly don't want to get into like daily recaps of the playoffs, right? I mean, I don't think we need that. But the Mariners, let's start with the ALCS. The Mariners are up 2-0 on the Blue Jays. Seattle's just looked dominant. And I really mean that in the truest sense of the word. Bryce Miller in game 1 went 6 innings pitched with 2 hits and 1 earned run. Cal Raleigh homer in game 1. And Jorge Polanco, 2 RBI in game 1, 3-run homer in game 2. Josh Naylor, 2-run homer in game 2. Mariners bullpen, 9 innings pitched, 1 hit, 0 runs across 2 games. Toronto's offense has just vanished. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Dalton Varsho, Davis Snyder are hitless. The Mariners are 2 wins away from their first World Series appearance. The Dodgers, they're up 2-0 on the Brewers, and the Dodgers, much like the Mariners, are rolling. Game 1, Blake Snell, 8 innings pitched, 1 hit, 0 earned runs, 10 Ks, faced the minimum. Freddie Freeman solo home run in game 1 was the difference. Game 2, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, 7 innings pitched, 1 earned run. Dodgers bullpen shaky. They held on. The Brewers had a historic 8-6-2 double play in game 1, but their offense hasn't matched the Dodgers' firepower. I think we're barreling towards a Mariners and Dodgers matchup in the World Series. Mariners are a power-heavy lineup, elite bullpen, hungry for their first title. Dodgers star-studded roster, dominant pitching, defending champs, supposed to be here. We're going to keep tracking it, but that's where it looks right now. And I have to say, the Mariners are a team that I would think most smaller market teams should be aspiring to be. I know they had some messy moments not very long ago with their ownership and GM. I mean, we're talking like less than a decade ago where they were getting in trouble for saying things out loud they shouldn't have been saying and just doing a lot of dumb things. But they have really turned it around. They've developed a great pitching staff throughout their system. They've done a terrific job of going out and acquiring bats that they needed to make this happen. Randy Arozarena, Josh Naylor. I mean, like they've done a really good job of building around what they've brought in on their own. They've stacked on ready-made major league talent on top of it to kind of push them over the top. They were in a dogfight all year for the division, and they won it. They pushed in their chips at the right time. Like Josh Naylor is an impending free agent. They didn't care. They brought him in to man first base because they needed it. Cal Raleigh had a breakout season. Arguably the best season that any switch hitters ever had. And the pitching was brilliant this whole year. Bullpen. I mean, they even made some nice strategic moves for the bullpen at the trade deadline that I think go under the radar. Caleb Ferguson among them. There's a lot of really good things to take away from the Mariners. This might be the strongest Mariners team I've ever seen, and I do go as far back as the Randy Johnson Jr. days. I mean, I remember those teams; they were interesting, but I also remember Randy Johnson throwing like just about every day, trying to get them to that point because he was the power and the glory on that team. And for a while it looked like they were trying again, and it was King Felix, and he was the only pitcher. Well, they've done a lot better now. They've got a lot of pitchers. They've got George Kirby. They've got a lot of pitching now. They can go 3-4 deep against you. And a lot of these guys have pitched all year, and that might be the weirdest difference between these two is the Mariners pitching staff, for the most part, has gone all year. They're probably getting to levels they haven't reached before. And that's always going to be an intangible that I'm not sure you can plan for. Dodgers, on the other hand, some of their better players, some of their better starting rotation members haven't been here all year. Blake Snell essentially had the regular season as spring training. And here he is mowing guys down, doing things in the playoffs that he's never done. Nobody's ever allowed Blake Snell to go 7 or 8 innings. That's never been in his MO. Not when he was with Tampa, not when he was with San Diego, honestly, not when he's been with the Dodgers up until this playoff run. And it's because he's fresh. It's because he hasn't thrown innings, because he was injured all year. And this is one of those problems that I think that people glaze over when we talk about, salaries being so outlandish. Well, the Dodgers can afford to pay a guy that they know is injured, for a good half to 3/4 of a season, just to have him back for the playoffs. And they've got plenty to get in without him. They've got guys coming out of their bullpen that others would have as their feature starter. And it's going to be a David versus Goliath no matter how these teams are playing. I don't think that the winner of this World Series determines whether we have a lockout or a cap or anything. So I would encourage you to take the significance of it off for that. But the Mariners have never won a World Series, and I always root for that. Toronto, I'm shocked by how lifeless they look. As badly as they beat the Yankees, I thought, sure, this was going to be a better matchup than it's been. But the Blue Jays have looked like a team that traveled across the country and wasn't ready. They just have put up no fight in this series at all. It has just been nothing. And the Dodgers and Brewers, well, the Brewers are trying to win the way they always do, but the Dodgers are just too good. They're just too good, and things are just starting to come together for them now. They're finally largely healthy. They're well coached. They've got a coach who's been in this position a lot, because I know we have diversity of winners in Major League Baseball. We have that parity, right? Except we kind of don't when it comes to who actually gets in the playoffs a lot. The Dodgers are in it a lot. That means a lot of playoff experience, even when you don't win. I would expect this to be a pretty good World Series if that was the matchup. I'm not ruling out that the Brewers can come back. The Brewers should be getting a chance to kind of stabilize a little bit against the Dodgers, but they've thrown arguably their two best pitchers at them, and it had very little effect. And the Dodgers are in no way, shape, or form going to take a step back in the next people that they present to the Brewers. I think that the Brewers are just coming up against the buzzsaw I kind of envisioned them coming up against. And when it comes right down to it, I just don't think they have the power or the pitching to keep up with the Dodgers. I've felt that for the whole playoff. I think we saw it almost bite them against the Cubs, who had more power and stayed in that series with it. What the Brewers are trying to do is walk a tightrope. They're trying to win on a shoestring budget, and they are impressive. They've done more than any other small market team. The Mariners, they're close, but the Mariners have gone out and gotten some star power to kind of help fortify things via trade. I can't say the same for the Brewers. They tend to do a lot more internal development. Sometimes it's enough and sometimes it's not. Sometimes when you only have 2 or 3 guys who can really do damage, it's a lot easier for an experienced pitching staff to negate you. Just take you out of the equation. Yeah, you got 3 guys who can hit. That's okay. I'll just make sure that the other 7 don't, or the other 6 don't. And you just won't see anything. Dodgers could do that. But then again, they could just throw a series of 3 or 4 number ones at you and see what happens. So far, that's all they've had to do. Just throw a couple number ones at you and let them do their thing. Playoffs have been fun. Just not as fun as I think some of us wanted them to be. ALCS and NLCS with no drama will not be a great thing. So let's hope that the two teams that are down 2-0 come back a little bit and make this interesting. If not, I think we're barreling towards a pretty interesting World Series at least. That's it for today's episode. A waiver claim that made me shrug, a stat breakdown, and a look at two teams that might just meet in the Fall Classic. And as always, we're serious about Pirates baseball because somebody has to be. Let's go Bucks.